Hi, welcome to this webinar on JUMP, giving an overview of the JUMP programme. My name is Jan Burkhardt. I'm the Knowledge Mobilisation Lead for the Children's Physical Activity and the former Director of JUMP, and I'll hand over to my colleague Sally to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Sally Barber. I'm the Director of Physical Activity Research at Born in Bradford and have been involved with the JUMP programme from the very beginning.
Thanks, Sally. So this is really to give you an overview of the programme and how it fits together. And obviously on our resource hub on the website, you'll find all sorts of other detailed resources about the various aspects of JUMP. So to give the overview, JUMP is a place-based physical activity programme funded by Sport England. The aim of the programme was to make a step change in physical activity levels of children aged 5 to 14 and their families in a socioeconomically disadvantaged area of Bradford. We took a whole systems approach. We worked really collaboratively with partners and in an asset-based, solution-focused way. We were really focused from the very beginning on trying to create sustainable behaviour change, and that was at the heart of what we did. It's a major test and learn programme, and Sally will say a bit more about the research side shortly. The outcomes that we were measuring and that we were hoping to achieve was better health and well-being, better skills, and to create safe, clean, active communities. So involved was a whole number of partners. It was a really collaborative effort, but Active Bradford was the partnership that led the programme, although it was hosted and delivered through Born in Bradford, which is a research institute. Other key partners were University of Bradford and obviously Bradford Council were involved in many ways. There were many other partners from community to all sorts of levels as well. We were supported by funding from Sport England as part of their place-based work and also by NIHR from a research side. So I'm going to hand over to Sally to talk a little bit about the data side of things. So over to Sally.
Thank you, Jan. So when we first set out to think about how we were going to improve physical activity for children living in Bradford, the first point of call really was to understand what levels of physical activity were in the district at the time. And we used the data that we've collected through the Born in Bradford cohorts to understand how active children were in Bradford. What we found, so we did this using accelerometers, which is sort of an objective measure of physical activity, a bit like a pedometer. So what we found were that 77% of 5 to 11-year-olds in Bradford were not active enough to benefit their health, and 38% leave primary school overweight or obese. So we went into the data and broke it down, looking at differences between boys and girls, looking at ethnic differences as well. And I think the big take home from this particular slide is that we do see differences between boys and girls. We do see ethnic differences, but sort of the most stark statistic here is that our Pakistani heritage girls were on average only taking part in 33 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity each day, whereas the guideline is 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per day. And only 6% of those girls were meeting physical activity guidelines. So we had a big focus on, through JUMP, to particularly support our South Asian communities within Bradford, and also a focus on supporting girls to be more active.
Sorry, I just need a slide on.
So where did we start and where have we got to? So this is what we call our JUMP concept model, which you'll be able to find more information in the resource hub about, but I'll just briefly go over it. So we started by developing the JUMP intervention. And to do this, we started by understanding the context. So we looked at what the local assets that we have available within Bradford are. We spoke to our communities to understand what they saw as necessary to improve children's health and well-being. So we spoke to families, we spoke to children, we spoke to wider community members. We spoke to different partners across the district about what they saw was important to improve children's health and well-being. We looked at what the social, political and the economic environment was around Bradford at the time, particularly thinking about how the Sport England funding could sort of boost this. And then the other thing that we did was delve into the research and the evidence around what works to support children to be more physically active. So we did that looking at our local data in Bradford, but also nationally and internationally, really doing deep dives into the literature. What do we need to be doing to support children to be more physically active? And we sort of brought all of that information together, worked with our partners, to sort of come up with a plan. And what we've done throughout the whole of Jump is continue that process. So it's not a static program. So we evolve the program. We always continually appraise the local context, the local community voices, what's happening socially, politically, and economically, and what's happening in the research to make sure that the program isn't static and it's evolving and improving. So what fell out of that initial sort of exploration quite neatly fits across what we call the socio-ecological model. So that is that there are these 5 circles in the middle of the diagram here. So these are the themes that we worked across. So one of the themes is children and families, the next is communities, the next is organizations, the next is environment, and the final one is policy and strategy. So within those circles, there are 16 different work streams that fit either quite neatly into one of those circles, or they might cross the boundaries between some of those circles as well. So there were the work streams that we worked upon during the Jump phase. But what we did was ensure that the work streams were developed underpinned by behaviour change theory, underpinned by evidence. They were co-produced and co-designed. So each one of our work streams, we worked with children, we worked with families, we worked with the necessary and relevant community members and relevant partners to ensure that the interventions that we were putting in place were fit for purpose. And we undertook this test and learn process, which meant that we were evaluating and understanding how each of these work streams was working, what was good about it, what wasn't working as well, and could make this kind of continual development of the individual work streams as well as the programme as a whole. And then finally, I think the other thing that's really important to understand in terms of the Jump concept is that these work streams don't sort of sit in isolation. They connect up with one another. And we have these really important connection mechanisms that Jan will talk to you about a little bit later on. So this diagram just explains and sort of demonstrates how those different 16 work streams connect up with one another so that we see this system working together rather than individual work streams working on their own. So alongside the implementation work that we did in the local delivery pilot phase of Jump, we also had a big focus on generating research and evidence to understand how the Jump programme was working. So as you can see in the box in the middle here, we conducted something called a process evaluation. And that process evaluation looked at what was working and not working, who was it working for, how was it working, and why was it working. And we can use that information to feed back into the evidence-based development of Jump, but also to share to other places who can then take that learning into their places as well. We also conducted an effectiveness study. So we conducted a controlled trial with an intervention group sat inside the Jump areas, and a control group sat outside the Jump areas, so we could compare the two groups. And we used this to understand the impacts and the mechanisms of Jump. And again, from that, we can use the information there to share to other places so they can understand what might work for their places, but also to develop and continue the evidence-based development and evolution of the Jump programme.
Thanks, Sally. So we're going to talk now about the various Jump work streams, which there are 16, and this is really an overview, just a kind of whistle-stop tour through the work we did, and a bit of sharing of the learning and the challenges and the successes that we feel came along the way. So I'm going to start by thinking about the policy and strategy element, which is an absolutely key part of whole systems working around physical activity, and gives you that top cover. Because although we worked actually really focused on tackling inequalities at a hyper-local level, this piece of work around the strategic system and the policy level is also really important. So we started by bringing numbers of partners together across these 11 areas where research shows that there are policies that can actually influence physical activity. So you can see those down the left. And then we did an exercise with our partners where we actually identified all of the strategies and policies in Bradford that could have an impact on physical activity. And then we mapped them with those at the centre are where physical activity was well embedded. And then as you move out towards the edge of the bullseye, it was less well embedded. So you can see there that children and young people strategy, children and young people's plan at the time, didn't actually talk about physical activity at all. It had child obesity as a priority and a focus. And the work we did over the years of the JUMP program, for example, one example of that was we actually really kind of influenced that strategy and helped our partners to really get their buy-in to understand that physical activity is actually meets multiple outcomes and could be a great enabler. So the current Children and Young People's Plan has physical activity as a standalone priority and as an enabler across the whole sort of outcomes that they're trying to achieve. So that was an example. So that would then move our Children and Young People's strategy more towards the centre of that bullseye. So that was our sort of baseline piece of work. And then we went on a long journey really, and the journey was as important as the destination to co-design a physical activity strategy, taking a whole systems approach. So we brought together over 80 strategic leaders and hundreds of wider partners into this journey, which involved collaborative workshops where we looked together at what our barriers and enablers were, where our strengths and weaknesses were across those different policy areas. And the result of that was the production of the Every Move Counts strategy for the district, which has these 9 thematic areas. And for each of those thematic areas, we have a thematic lead. We have a group who are a implementation group to support and facilitate the delivery of this strategy. But it's a very live action plan, and it's aiming to be very flexible and move with the times and the opportunities. So that's where what we're building on at a policy level, with very close partnerships with all our city council partners, our health service, our planning, transport, and parks and recreation and sports partners across the council. So, as I say, our really big focus was we really believe that if you want to tackle inequalities in physical activity, you absolutely need that policy piece, but you also need to work in those neighbourhoods with the most challenge and the most need at a really intensive hyperlocal level. So we took a neighbourhood approach where we brought together partners from really lots of parts of the system. So schools were really important, and we did focus mainly on primary schools. We did struggle to engage secondary schools, so that wasn't an area that we felt we made success. But in primary schools, we had over 36 schools involved. So in a neighbourhood, we might have 4 or 5 schools, faith settings, community organisations, and our council partners such as neighbourhood teams and ward officers. And that they were brought together with green space being something that we were looking to put at the heart of what we were doing as well. And this group would come together and co-design a local action plan to meet the needs of that specific area and community. As we said earlier, as Sally alluded to, connecting up the system and having mechanisms to connect the work was so important to this way of working. So we had a community engagement manager who would work across several neighbourhoods, and their job was to engage and build partnerships and connect up the system. And also to lead and facilitate that action plan to make sure that it was delivered. And we also had jump connectors. So the jump connectors, their job was really directly family facing primarily. So they were engaging families, building their confidence and motivation to be active, particularly in low cost, no cost, sustainable ways, such as simple things as using their local parks, just taking a walk with their kids, just using the local facilities that were already to hand. They also very much about engaging with the green space work, and they also built links connecting school, community and green spaces together. They were often local people, and they were kind of part-time roles. the community engagement managers, before, to identify those neighbourhoods, actually went through quite a process of just really mapping out what the green spaces were in our area, mapping out what assets we could build on, and also what are the people who could make a difference. So everything from organisations such as voluntary sector organisations down to those individual inspirational people that can sometimes make a difference at a community level. And from that point, we identified 8 neighbourhoods. And in each neighbourhood, we went through this co-design process of 3 workshops to develop that local action plan. And there's more about that on the resource hub. But basically, initially, it was really building that shared understanding, really kind of starting to gather people's knowledge around barriers and enablers, then generating ideas for action, looking at a rapid review of the evidence so that we really built evidence-based practice with our partners, and then finally refining that action plan and delivering it over a 2-year period with a 6-month period at the end to embed and sustain. One of our research methods was ripple effects mapping, which actually turned out to be really effective in terms of also finding a great way for our partners to realise what were the unintended consequences if we did this, but this happened as well. And it became a way of celebrating the success, and actually it was really well received. So it sort of both supported the research, but it actually helped with the implementation of the plans. So that was a really nice kind of outcome that was completely unintended. We did struggle sometimes with, I think one of our challenges was getting people to face-to-face meetings, which is so important. We couldn't have done this work if it had all been remote. And people's capacity to help deliver the plan at times was a challenge. So there's definitely those challenges to face. But I think the benefits of taking this co-design approach were particularly strong. So it really built that shared understanding, so all partners could see the importance of physical activity, and we got a lot of buy-in at different levels, both strategic and at the neighbourhood level. There's a real sense of shared responsibility and actually a real buy-in to the idea of an evidence-based approach across the district. And finally, I think it built so many great relationships and connectivity, and actually that collaboration is really already showing signs of having long-term benefits. So at a community level, so we've sort of talked about strategy. At a community level, I wanted to talk a bit about the work we did with environment. So community engagement was at absolutely the heart of the way we worked. It was, as Sally was alluding to, really like our whole principles were based upon that community engagement and co-design. And so our green space really reflected that. We developed 12 green space developments, 3 of which were completely new parks over the 4 or 5 years we were working. And we did co-design with our children in schools, but also with the community themselves. And we would come up with a process of having two designs that were co-designed with children and families, and then went out to a community vote. So an example of that would be in the Kashmir Park area. We developed this green space, which was before that just a completely overgrown, fenced off area. And we had over 2,000 members of the community vote on the green space. It was actually almost more than in the local elections. So people really got engaged, and that engagement is so important to maintaining the space. It's so well valued, and it's actually very low maintenance. There were lots of issues around antisocial behaviour in green space in Bradford, but we had a play worker to activate the space for a good chunk of time, like over a year, following on from the development of the green space. And that helped to create a really playful ethos and help people feel safe. And the park is really well used. And also a Friends of group, which is a very informal WhatsApp group, helped to maintain it. Maintenance of green space was a big challenge for us. The council were really struggling financially with that. So that is an ongoing issue. Even if you have resource to develop it, the maintenance is important. So I'm going to talk now just very briefly about the organisational side of thinking about the organisations that we worked with. So Creating Active Schools is a framework that was developed with a whole raft of partners, and is a piece of work that's happening nationally. We had 36 schools in the Jump area and 56 schools across the district in total involved in this framework. And it's trying to take a real whole systems approach within schools. So the approach involves thinking about the different layers across the system. So we're thinking about policy first. So we want our senior leaders to really have that buy-in and see the importance of physical activity for their school. Thinking about the school environment, how do we adapt playgrounds and classrooms to allow for moving and playing more? And our stakeholders, and that's everything from governors to teachers down to children and families themselves, how really having a plan that actually involves all of our stakeholders. And then finally, last but least, really, it's about the opportunities, and those are the opportunities that might be both during the school day, but also before and after school. And by doing all these things in a joined up way and doing them in a way that was really focused on sustainability from the beginning, this has been something which has made a big difference to our schools, particularly the schools' feedback that behaviour has improved massively. That's one of the areas where we see a big change, but also we know from our research that physical activity levels have improved. So another major part of our work was focusing actually on our faith settings. So I'm going to hand over to Sally for a change of voice to tell you about the faith settings work.
Yeah, so most of our faith settings work has focused on the madrasas in Bradford. So for those of you that don't know, madrasas are supplementary schools that most children attend, most Muslim children attend, for perhaps up to 2 hours an evening after sort of regular school finishes. And those madrasas are run mainly by volunteers. And children go to learn Islamic teachings and to be able to recite the Quran. So what we saw is that the faith settings, particularly the mosques and the madrasas, offer another whole system opportunity for families, communities, children, young people to engage. So they reach out to children and young people. We have parents and families accessing these organisations frequently. They engage and work with their local communities. We also have people like local business owners. So being able to kind of tap into sort of local businesses and the assets that they can bring into the work as well. The madrasas have some madrasas, not all madrasas. So some madrasas are very tiny and some madrasas are very large, and they have, the larger ones will have physical assets that can be used to promote physical activity. And in fact, what we've seen in Bradford is the work that we've been doing has influenced some of the madrasas that are redeveloping to do things like put a football pitch on the roof or build in space for physical activity within their settings. And then what we see is that for those settings that don't have those physical assets, they're often sited next to other local organisations. So for example, community centres or schools. And so to be able to link those settings into those other organisations, to be able to use that space for physical activity and to build the relationship between the faith settings themselves and those other local organisations to support children to be more active across the system. And then finally, Islamic scripture actually has health messages written within the religious scripture that match up to our health and wellbeing messages. Oh, I want to press the button, Jan, but I can't do it. So over to you. Thank you. So what we found is that madrasas are an excellent opportunity to promote physical activity in Bradford. Our population in Bradford is 25% Bangladeshi, Pakistani and Bangladeshi. We have 120 registered Islamic religious settings. And we're actually 25% Pakistani and Bangladeshi as a total population, but our childhood population is much higher. So it's about 45% of the children and young people in Bradford are of Pakistani or Bangladeshi heritage. And then some of our research has shown that 91% of Muslim primary school children attend a madrasa after school. So it is this excellent opportunity to be able to reach out to those settings, to engage those children in physical activity in a different way and in a different space. So our Healthy Madrasas programme has these 4 kind of key components that we found are absolutely essential to be able to engage with the madrasas in the first instance and support them to deliver physical activity and health messages. So the first one in the light green colour, number one, is to have a local delivery organisation. And so that local delivery organisation's role really is to link madrasas into the health system. So for many years, madrasas or mosques may have done one or two sort of individual physical activity or health promotion sessions, maybe once a year or very infrequently, and they've not been connected into the opportunities, the resources that's available to them through the health system. And so the local delivery organisation is really key to sort of change the structural inequalities that we see, so to link those organisations into the health system. The other thing that the local delivery organisation does that's really important is to be able to hold funds to purchase equipment or resources that the madrasa might need in order to facilitate physical activity. So then the local delivery organisation employs madrasa engagement managers, and those madrasa engagement managers support each individual madrasas to plan and deliver health promotion activities. So they first engage and recruit the madrasas into taking part in the intervention, and that can be a really lengthy process. So one of the challenges is that the settings haven't been involved in any sort of health promotion before, and it's sort of additional. They see it at the outset as additional to their core business, which is about religious education. And so the community engagement managers can spend up to about 6 months really kind of building rapport and relationships to get a particular madrasa interested and involved in working sort of on a health agenda. Then we have the health group. So once community engagement managers engaged a madrasa, they convene a health group, which is made up of people that sit within their setting. So the teachers, parents, maybe the imam, some of the key players within the setting. And their job is to plan and deliver the health promotion activities within their setting. And they use a culturally relevant toolkit and resource that we've developed, which is our section 4 there. And within that resource, the materials and the messages are supported by Islamic narrative. And what we found is that's really motivational for the health group in terms of engaging with the intervention in the first instance and maintaining that engagement.
Great stuff. Thank you, Sally. That's a really nice sort of understanding of how it's worked, as well as why it's so beneficial to do that piece of work. I'm going to just talk very briefly about a few more work streams. Obviously, with 16, it's a lot to cover, but just to give you a bit of a sense of other things that we've been working on. Sorry, my slides are jumping around. So in terms of the other piece of organisational work, we worked with sports organisations, and we really challenged our sports organisations to look at how they could make sustainable change through our tendering process, and how they could, sustainably engage our less active communities. So the focus was very much on girls and on children from ethnic minority backgrounds. And this is just one example. The Great Horton Church Cricket Club, which had a long history of having cricket for men and boys, that never had a girls team, were keen to have an opportunity to develop that. And it was a really successful piece of work, with over 60 girls now playing regularly, playing cricket and playing in leagues locally, and also with the female coaches supporting the girls. So that piece of work has proven to be very sustainable. It did vary. I think some of our areas tried to charge, to charge children to attend, and I think given the economic situation, that was proved quite difficult to do. So we've talked about organisations, so just going to touch now on communities and children and families, the work we did around there. So one of the pieces of work that we did that actually spanned the whole of the jump area was working on how do we develop people's skills, how do we actually help people to have the capability to support the work around physical activity. And we did this through a number of areas, but the two big ones were we developed a children and families physical activity training course. And that's a 2 half-day course that was very much all of our jump connectors went through that training, and lots of our wider partners, even people working in the madrasas. And it was very interactive and very much about helping people to have that shared understanding around a whole system approach to physical activity and a behaviour change approach. And alongside that, we had the Jump Leads programme, which was a young leaders programme, much more intensive, working with 16 to 25-year-olds, again, targeting girls and South Asian and young people from diverse backgrounds, really. So that engaged a large number of young people, and some of them have gone on to sustain what they're doing, either supporting clubs or developing themselves as sort of freelance sports leaders. So that piece of work was very important because we needed to increase the number of role models for our young people, so that people could see that, yes, there are South Asian women who will play sport. They didn't really have the role models locally, so we hope that that will really help to sustain the work. Another piece of universal across the area, sort of key area that we worked on was at a more individual level, but we feel this is really important at whole systems that this is there, which was to have these social marketing work. So we had a number of jump campaigns, which were co-designed with children, and they focused on different elements that came out of our insight. So Jump Outdoors was focusing on encouraging families to get outdoors into green space and into their environment, whatever the weather, because weather was viewed as a big barrier. And we had lots of on-street sort of work around that. And Screen Off, Life On was focusing around swapping screen time for being active, which came through as another really sort of important piece of insight that children and young people were telling us that the biggest barrier to being active was that they're just really into their digital world, and they were, had to be encouraged. They needed to find a way to actually get the balance. We had over 10,500 people join the movement, join us Move Play. And that was really achieved through a series of fun days in schools and community settings, which were incentivized with little prizes, and where families got to do activities that were really simple, low cost, no cost things they could do at home, like playing a game with a ball or doing some home circuits. They were really well received. We've got very high numbers of people attending, and those have sustained, with some schools just continuing them because they were very popular. But it allowed us to, once we were giving prizes to those children and their families, their parents particularly, attended well, they would be encouraged to sign up to our newsletter and our campaign. And then we still have an ongoing ability to communicate the messages that will educate and motivate and inspire our families to be active. So the People Like Us approach that we took, this is a great example of one of our champions, and she was part of the campaign. She's on the poster, but she was also on WhatsApp and social media sharing through her own networks. So that was a lovely piece of work. And this is our Screen Off, Life On, which we did a lot of work through Snapchat and TikTok, and had really high levels of click-through from young people. So finally, just to reiterate, really, I suppose we talked a lot about what we've done. I think absolutely as important is the values and the approach that we took throughout Jump. And I think if we hadn't taken this approach, we would never have achieved what we have achieved. And I think that collaborative approach, working with, not for, two communities, working with partners, was absolutely key. That community engagement and co-design principles, which ran throughout all the programs, establishing sustainable activity from the very beginnings, that really is thinking about how can we sustain this. And that's really a huge challenge, particularly in communities where there isn't much resource and where there are lots of stresses and competing priorities. Taking a behaviour change approach, so thinking about how do we build the capability, opportunity and motivation for children and families to be active. Building on the assets and the energy. There's so much to build on, even in communities that are very stretched, that actually means you have that positive focus. And part of that, we found establishing a really fun, energizing and inclusive ethos helped to really galvanize the energy. And finally, taking a test and learn approach, you know, being open to trying something new, taking risks, and then iteratively learning and adapting what we did as we went along. So it's been quite a journey and an extraordinary opportunity. And I hope that what we've learned will be really, really useful for lots of people who are embarking on this journey around whole systems physical activity, be that all age or with a particular children's focus. So one of the things we're doing in this next phase, which is having come to the end of the local delivery pilot phase, is to share our learning and open source as many of our assets as possible to support our Sport England's Place partnership expansion, but also just more widely, anybody who is working around whole systems physical activity and would like to learn more. So thank you very much for listening to this webinar. I hope it's been useful. If you want to get in touch, you can find my email on the resource hub. And thank you, Sally, as well for being part of this. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.